Today, we're diving into one of the most disturbing and still unfolding corporate safety scandals in recent memory, Boeing 737 MAX, the whistleblowers, the string of deaths that followed, and the aftermath. I've seen it all. For nearly 25 years, I worked at the DOJ, where I investigated some of the largest antitrust cases in the country. Now in retirement, I'm working for you. Welcome to the Antitrust Insider. Why did America's largest aerospace company repeatedly choose corporate inertia over transparency? And why, tragically, did several brave souls who sounded the alarm end up dead? Join me as we unpack the facts, all based on court filings, credible journalism, and whistleblower statements. Boeing, once seen as the crown jewel of American aerospace engineering, had built its legacy on reliability, innovation, and trust. For decades, the company symbolized technological excellence and national pride. But by the early 2010s, that legacy was quietly shifting under the weight of intensifying market pressure. When Airbus unveiled its sleek and fuel-efficient A320neo, Boeing's dominance in the single-aisle jet market came under threat. Airlines were eager to cut fuel costs, and Airbus was already locking in lucrative deals with carriers around the world. Boeing needed a response, and fast. But instead of designing a new aircraft from the ground up, Boeing executives opted for a shortcut: upgrade the existing 737 platform. The result was the 737 MAX. Internally, the MAX was viewed not just as a competitor to Airbus, it was essentially a lifeline. Corporate timelines were razor tight, shareholder expectations were sky high, engineering teams were told explicitly and repeatedly to prioritize speed and cost efficiency. Every delay meant millions in lost orders. Every redesign risked losing Boeing's most loyal customers. The pressure from the top was immense. Get it done fast, get it done cheap, and whatever you do, don't let it look like a different aircraft. If the MAX could be marketed as simply a more efficient 737, Boeing could bypass costly pilot retraining requirements, saving airlines time and money, and giving Boeing an edge. But that decision had consequences. To make the MAX behave like its predecessor, engineers had to overcome a serious aerodynamic challenge. The new, larger engines, mounted higher and further forward on the wing, changed the plane's center of gravity. In certain high-angle flight conditions, this caused the nose to pitch upward, increasing the risk of a stall. To counteract this, Boeing developed a software solution, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS. This system was designed to automatically push the nose down if it sensed a high angle of attack, which effectively masked the aerodynamic differences between the MAX and earlier 737s. Rather than highlighting it as a new and critical system, Boeing buried it. MCAS wasn't mentioned in the pilot manual, it wasn't included in simulator training, and most pilots didn't even know it existed. The fewer changes Boeing acknowledged, the less retraining airlines would have to pay for, and regulators weren't fully informed either. MCAS was quietly embedded into the flight control software without drawing much attention from the FAA during the certification process, and that secrecy would prove fatal. On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 climbed into the clear skies over Jakarta. 12 minutes later, it plummeted into the Java Sea. All 189 people on board died. The black box revealed a chilling detail. The plane's MCAS software forced the nose down over and over as pilots fought to pull it up. But this wasn't a freak accident. According to the DOJ's 2021 Deferred Prosecution Agreement, MCAS was a flaw that Boeing knew about. 4 months later, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed in near identical fashion. 157 lives were lost. Boeing's initial response? A few quick software patch promises, but no admission of blame. Instead, they blamed pilot error. The FAA grounded the fleet. As the world reeled from the tragedies of Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, the initial shock began to give way to an urgent demand for accountability. These crashes were not isolated. Some internal documents revealed that internal safety concerns were raised during development, but those concerns were minimized, deferred, or outright ignored. In one now infamous email, a Boeing employee wrote, quote, "This airplane is designed by clowns who in turn are supervised by monkeys." While the tone was flippant, the underlying frustration was clear. Safety was taking a back seat to deadlines. Yet, executives pushed the FAA to fast-track approval, hiding MCAS from pilot manuals to avoid costly simulator training. Emails showed that Boeing knew MCAS could fail catastrophically and did nothing. And then came the testimony. A senior Boeing pilot and flight control engineer, whose name I will withhold here for privacy and safety, stepped forward with a chilling account. Under oath, he testified that he was pressured by senior management to sign off on MCAS changes that had not been properly vetted. The software had been revised multiple times during development, yet each time, critical safety assessments were either rushed or skipped entirely. Why? To meet internal timelines and budget caps. But the most damning detail came from an internal note which described MCAS as a system that, quote, forces pitch stabilization in razor-thin margins. In plain simple English, the software was designed to make the plane fly right on the edge, correcting a dangerous aerodynamic flaw, but with almost no room for error. Worse still, the system had never been fully validated in real-world failure scenarios. Simulated conditions couldn't account for real cockpit noise or real-world emergencies. And yet, with all this knowledge, Boeing moved forward. The plane was certified, the flights were booked, and passengers boarded a jet with a known vulnerability hidden inside. This wasn't just an engineering oversight, it was a corporate decision, one that prioritized cost and delivery dates over the most fundamental principle in aviation: safety. Boeing had FAA-approved engineers certify their own designs, a cozy arrangement skewed by financial incentives. Another internal memo read, quote, "We self-cert because the FAA doesn't have enough staff, but we can't tell them we're rushing it." To be clear, the FAA sent a few employees to the Boeing Renton plant after the crashes, but by then it was already too late. Boeing's 737 MAX scandal didn't just claim lives in the air. On the ground, a string of whistleblowers, people who knew too much, started dying under suspicious circumstances, and the pattern is hard to ignore. Meet John Barnett, a 32-year Boeing quality manager. He spent years warning about rushed production and defective parts on the 787 Dreamliner. In 2019, he filed a whistleblower lawsuit, and in March 2024, just days before testifying against Boeing, he was found dead in his truck. A suicide note was found on his lap, but colleagues say Barnett was upbeat, even excited, to finally expose the truth. It was reported in March 2025 that Barnett's family is suing Boeing, accusing them of retaliation and contributing to Barnett's death. Then there's Dr. Catherine Rice, the scientist who challenged Boeing's tests. A brilliant aerospace engineer and Boeing contractor, she filed a 2019 OSHA complaint accusing the company of falsifying safety tests for the 737 MAX's flight sensors. A year later, she died suddenly. Officially, the cause was natural, but her family insists she was in good health and her death came just as scrutiny on Boeing reached its peak. Then there's the mysterious John Doe No. 2, a Boeing test pilot who allegedly knew about critical flaws in the 737 MAX's flight controls. His identity was reportedly hidden in sealed court documents and was scheduled to testify in a 2021 lawsuit. He had reportedly warned upper management about safety risks, but before he could speak under oath, he was found dead in his car. Officially, it was ruled a suicide, yet his death, like others tied to the MAX scandal, fueled speculation. The public outrage following the two 737 MAX crashes was loud and global. Boeing, once viewed as too big to fail and too trusted to doubt, now found itself facing a reckoning in Washington and beyond. In early 2021, after years of investigations, Boeing agreed to a staggering $2.5 billion settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice. The charge? Conspiracy to defraud the FAA. The DOJ's investigation concluded that Boeing knowingly withheld critical safety information about MCAS from federal regulators, specifically how the software functioned and how it could repeatedly activate based on bad sensor data. This wasn't negligence, it was deception. The financial breakdown of the deal was telling. Roughly $500 million of the settlement was set aside for compensation to crash victim families. Another $1.77 billion went to Boeing airline customers who had suffered losses during the 20-month MAX grounding. And $243 million, that was the criminal penalty, the part that officially recognized Boeing's culpability in misleading the government. Yet notably, no individual executives were charged. This is where Congress stepped in. A series of high-profile hearings saw Boeing executives, including then-CEO Dennis Muilenburg, hauled before Senate and House committees. Muilenburg, often visibly uncomfortable during questioning, was pressed repeatedly about Boeing's internal culture, its approach to safety, and the concealment of critical MCAS information. Senators and representatives on both sides of the aisle expressed disbelief. Some accused Boeing of prioritizing profits over people. Others criticized the FAA's failure to challenge Boeing's self-certifications. One particularly striking moment came when a senator asked Muilenburg directly, "Would you put your own family on a 737 MAX?" His hesitation was deafening. Lawmakers pushed for reform not just with Boeing, but also in how whistleblowers are protected. Several former Boeing employees who had raised alarms either internally or to federal agencies were retroactively shielded under the Dodd-Frank Act, a law originally intended to protect the financial sector whistleblowers after the 2008 crash. In Boeing's case, it became a legal refuge for engineers and safety specialists who had been sidelined, demoted, or ignored for speaking up. This led to modified corporate procedures within Boeing's quality assurance department. But critics note, while the system may have changed, the culture remains difficult to shift. Corporate inertia, they argue, is slow, especially when profits are on the line. The settlement, the hearings, the procedural updates, they were definitely important, but for the families of the 346 victims, these changes would never be enough. The Government Accountability Office, or GAO, issued a damning report calling for major changes. The first change was the software overhaul. MCAS had been revamped to take inputs from 2 sensors instead of 1, limit authority, and avoid repetitive activation. Next was pilot training. Boeing now provides full simulator training for MAX pilots. The report also recommended stricter FAA oversight of Boeing and reduced reliance on company employees to perform safety inspections. While the FAA has adopted some reforms, critics argue that oversight still remains too lax and that Boeing still has significant influence over the certification process. When profit goals eclipse engineering and mechanical diligence, the results can be deadly. As consumers, taxpayers, and as human beings, we deserve a system that learns from crashes and doesn't just bury the error. The tragedy of the 737 MAX was not a freak accident. It was a culmination of a broken culture. Boeing and regulators must remain vigilant. Whistleblowers must be heard with their testimony considered and not dismissed. What's your take on the 737 MAX scandal? Comment below. Thanks for watching. Stay honest, stay vigilant, and come back for more Antitrust Insider.